Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. My name's Katie and I upload book-related videos every single Wednesday, and I do want to point out first, before I get into this review of Fierce Kingdom, that generally I'm a big fan of DNFing books. Normally, if I'm not loving a book, I put it down. Come for Bigfoot is an exception because you guys voted for me to read it, but I had planned on reviewing Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng today. However, I went to go finish the audiobook. I pulled it up on Overdrive on my phone a few days ago and it had expired. So I am back to being on the waiting list, and I was looking at my bookshelf thinking what video I could make. I was already halfway through Fierce Kingdom, and I did have a fair amount of you guys saying you had already picked this up and wanted me to review it. So I just figured let's go ahead and finish this and post a review. Getting into the summary with no spoilers, our protagonist is Joan and she's with her little son Lincoln. I believe he's 5 or 6. They're at the zoo. It's one of their favorite places to go. It's about to close, so they're heading out to leave. And then all of the summary on like the inside of the jacket and online just says that they see something horrible happen basically and they run back into the zoo. Now I know that I just said there aren't going to be spoilers in this review. I don't think what I'm about to say is a spoiler, mainly because the marketing for this book is irritating me just a tiny bit, and that you can tell they're not telling you what the mother sees because they're trying to get people to wonder like, oh, I wonder what she sees when she's about to leave. What makes her have to hide in the zoo with her son? Now I'm going to tell you guys what it is she sees, and I don't think it's a spoiler only because it happens so early on in the book, and also it's what you would expect it to be. It's what I thought it would be, so I just don't really consider this a spoiler because it happens so early on. But again, if you consider this a spoiler, then go ahead and close the video. So when I read the inside jacket, I was like, oh, it's probably a shooter. And then I started reading the book, and 20-30 pages in, she gets to the zoo exit and it's what I thought, it's a shooter. And at that point I was still really interested, and now I'll move into the prose. So first, the reason I was initially intrigued by this book, and I will say this is a fairly decent sized pro, is that I've never encountered a zoo setting for a thriller, and I think the setting of the zoo is a really unique idea. I feel like there are a fair amount of thrillers and horror novels set at, say, like carnivals or fairs, but I've never encountered one that's set at a zoo, so I did think that was really unique and interesting. The other aspect I'll admit that drew me to this book that I really liked was just the cover. And then one of my booktube friends, I'll put a picture of their Instagram here, she pointed out, and I think this is why I really love the cover, is that it's sort of similar, not saying it was, you know, plagiarizing, but it is a little similar to The Enchanted, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And now getting into the cons. And I will say first, I do think some people might really love this book. For example, even though I gave this 1 star, I really did not like it, I'm going to give this to my mom because I think she will fall head over heels and love this. I think because she's had me and my brother, I think she really might connect to Joan and be able to kind of put herself in Joan's situation and think, what would I have done if it was Eric or Katie that I was holding at the zoo? What would I have done in this situation? So she also really loves thrillers, so I think she might really enjoy this. I just personally really did not, and I'm going to get into why. So first, a book like this, one of the main aspects that should be really intriguing, or at least cause a lot of tension and intrigue, is the villain. And I won't talk about what the villain is like whatsoever. I'm just gonna say I did not find the villain interesting or intriguing whatsoever. So as the villain is like stalking them throughout the zoo, I just never really felt a sense of tension or dread. I kept imagining that there were going to be maybe possibly interesting interactions between Joan and the villain, but anytime the villain was on screen, I was just like, I was never fearful whatsoever. I was like, okay, they're there, now they're gonna leave. A book that handles this concept really well, I think, is The Bodies Left Behind. Granted, I haven't read it in like 5 years, but from what I remember, it's a female detective trying to save someone, and she's in the woods and the hitman is following her throughout the woods. And even though the hitman isn't like some crazed killer, he's like somewhat sane, their tiny interactions, even if there's no dialogue, are really interesting. And that's one big piece I thought that this book was lacking. Another thing I didn't like was I could tell that the author was trying to put you in the headspace of Joan and think, what would you do if you were in her situation? And she was trying to articulate it even when Joan did things that were just horrifically stupid. I'm gonna say a stupid thing that Joan does. I don't know if I would consider this a spoiler. You know what? I said at the beginning there weren't going to be spoilers. There might be mild spoilers. But at one point, a decent way through the book, she's been texting her husband throughout, you know, she's in contact with him. So she's been able to, you know, contact him and let them know exactly where they are, if the police can come get them and everything like that. Partway through the book, she just gets rid of her phone. And I think the author was trying to get you to feel very claustrophobic, and Joan was thinking like, okay, I am here with my son in the zoo, I'm gonna protect him, nothing that's going on outside matters. But the issue was she was so level-headed throughout other aspects of the book that her getting rid of her phone just kind of clashed with that, and to me at least did not make sense. And the main issue I had with this book was the pacing. For the first almost half of the book, a huge chunk, it's just her and her son hiding in one place of the zoo. And at first I thought, I was like, oh, is this gonna be like a phone booth situation where the entire book is told from one setting? Because I was like, if the author can do that and make it interesting, that would be really cool. That's not the case. So for a huge chunk of the book, they're there, and then after that they start moving around, and then all of a sudden narrators start switching to other people who are hidden at the zoo. Narrator switch is so jarring. I was like, who is this bitch? Where did she come from? Eventually, I will say though, I ended up finding the other narrators even more interesting, but it was so long into the book that they popped up, it just felt very disconnected. And I will say, I love me some fast-paced, fun thrillers that I still don't technically think are necessarily great books. I just reviewed Final Girls a few weeks ago, and although there were some aspects of that I really didn't like, I didn't think it was a perfect book by any means. It was a fun, fast-paced thriller beach read. This book I disliked, and I also can't say I think it's a fun, fast-paced beach read. I really struggled getting through this. However, again, just because this isn't my cup of tea, it doesn't mean I think other people aren't going to enjoy this. It's not like I hated this book and on top of that I'm like offended by it and don't want other people to read it. No, if some of my booktube friends whose opinions I really trust in books picked this book up and they thought it was a lot of fun. So by no means am I saying that this is like objectively awful. I just personally couldn't stand it. So I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Fierce Kingdom. I'm gonna leave and go turn on the AC because I'm dying, and I'll see you guys next week.